Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Strategy Gaming Dojo, where we find, learn, and play one more turn of the great strategy games. Today, we are continuing on with our Let's Play of Gary Grigsby's War in the Pacific Admirals Edition. This is currently episode number 8, and in this episode, we are going to talk about the beast that is China. This is a massive land war, and there is a lot to do with ground units. So far in these Let's Plays, and to be honest, in the tutorials, we maybe focused a little bit more on the naval, on the air war facets of World War II. That's not to say there were definitely ground troops, and ground troops are always going to be the most important component of an army because you can only take territory with boots on the ground for the most part. But this episode, we really get into the nitty gritty of ground units, how to move them, why you're moving them, garrisons. Why is this army group going here and why is this army group going there? So we will go through all of that and kind of, have it be a little bit of a tutorial about ground units themselves and talk about some big strategy ideas here in China and maybe a little bit of friction of what you want to do, what your goals are, what your objectives are in China. There's kind of two different ways that you can look at it, in my opinion. Well, there are probably a million different ways you can look at it, but I think there are two major ways, at least that I look at it, and ways that you could play the game. And we'll kind of discuss both of those. But first of all, I wanted to go up here to our preferences, and I wanted to make sure all of the volume settings were off. I know last time we had some ships that as they were steaming through the waves were making quite a racket as I was trying to talk last time. It happened a few times, and I listen back to these sometimes, and that one I did and that gives you a jolt. That'll wake you up in the morning, boys, to quote Braveheart. But anyway, let's get back to China. I see that we have all of those set to 0. Hopefully, we won't have that problem. I've also got our volume muted down here. Now, the great thing about a Let's Play as opposed to a pure tutorial is that we can try different things. Uh, if we mess up, that almost adds to the fun. I can tell you that I started recording this episode once before, and then I changed my mind. And I changed my mind because of some input and just talking on the Matrix forums and also, offline with some other people that know this game very well. And when I play the Chinese theater here, I generally do it one way. And through talking with these people, whether on the forum or otherwise, I'm going to try to play it a different way this time. I think there's good arguments to be made on both sides. But let's talk about. You're probably saying, well, what the heck are you talking about? Tell me about it, and then we can all decide, right? So let's get the pencil out because I always like to do that. And let's talk about the situation right here at the start. Now, Japan has taken Indochina, okay? So Japan has a lot of troops over here, right, that are going to be trying to push this way. Now, we still have some things here on the coast, including a, random French base that's here. Um, we have, lots of units, and then you got to kind of step back and try to make sense of what all those units are doing, what we should be try to what we should try to be doing, and what are our objectives? And I think many times people again will lose the forest for the trees. They'll think, well, I want to move this here and this there. Why are you doing those things? Like, what's the ultimate goal here? So anyway, the Japanese have landed here, right? So there we go. Um, leaving Hong Kong. So the British base of Hong Kong is still occupied by our allied troops. It will very quickly fall, probably on the first or second turn. The Japanese come at it, and as you see the bright red here and the kind of pink here. They've got, a lot of troops. So as we go through Hong Kong, we'll talk about, we're going to try to get as much of this out of here as we can as far as ships go. The planes and the ground units are kind of a different story. One, it would have been a little ahistorical to try to get too many of the troops out. And two, you always want to kind of slow them down. And this is the yin and the yang of playing the Chinese theater here is how much are you trying to slow them down? It kind of goes to what we were talking about when it came to Borneo and Burma. It will come up again in the Philippines is what's your goal here? You're trying to slow the Japanese down. You can't stop them. The Japanese are going to take Hong Kong unless you have a human player that just says, well, I'm not going to take Hong Kong for some reason, but I've never seen that. There's no reason for that to happen. So they're going to take it, and then it just becomes a question of how much can you slow them down, or if you even try to slow them down at all. And we're going to get into this as we move around the map. Now you see the Japanese have landed here, so they're going to be pushing here you know, they're going to be, first of all, taking Hong Kong, right? But then they're going to be pushing up this way. So the Japanese have a lot of these coastal areas. And they've pushed a long way in here. They have a lot of these coastal areas, and then they have pushed further in, at different parts of the map. So let's, look at that. My God, is that gorgeous? Okay, let's turn this off for a second. You get the idea. Um, well, first of all, let's take a step back and just talk about the Japanese-Chinese conflict. My understanding is that Chinese history books and the People's Republic of China, their history czars, gurus, the part of the Communist Party, now claim that the Japanese-Chinese War actually started in 1931 with the invasion of Manchuria. I think that there is quite a bit of dispute about that. So the Japanese had pushed up into Manchuria. There is quite a bit of dispute about that, as much as you can have dispute in China about such things, in the fact that I think a lot of Chinese historians say, well, Manchuria wasn't really considered a core holding of China at the time. No one in China considered that invasion of Manchuria to really be the start of the war between Japan and China. That kicked off in July of 1937, so a full 6 years later. So Japan had been in Manchuria for quite some time, like I said, 6 years, and no one thought that China and Japan were at war. Again, I'm not here to get into Chinese politics. I'm just telling you that the Chinese Communist Party now considers this war as having started in 1931. Uh, Most historians outside of China consider that the Japanese-Chinese conflict started in July of 1937. There was a kind of dust up of troops in and around what is now Beijing, was Peiping, you can call it Peking, you know, eh, obviously there's been a lot of political upheaval in China over the last, 120 years. So a lot of these names have changed and were called different things at different times. But basically, there was kind of a dust up between Japanese and nationalistic Chinese troops in what is now Beijing, and that started the conflict. At that point, the Japanese got upset, like all wars, there was a quote unquote misunderstanding, and the next thing you know, Japan is fully invading China. Now, whatever the reason given may be, the real reason Japanese were invading China is for resources. Just the same reason the Imperial Japanese were invading other places. They were on the hunt for resources. It was their own version of Lebensraum, if you want to use the German term. or at least the term that Hitler used. Uh, they wanted to expand, get more resources. Ultimately, Japan is an island nation. It's a very good sized island, but an island nonetheless. I mean, you're talking about, something that's not even as big as the west coast of the United States. So they had pushed into Korea. They had pushed to the Soviet border up in Manchuria. Um, Now, one thing that I guess maybe I mentioned in the tutorials, maybe I just can't remember, is in Manchuria, Manchukuo, the Japanese have to keep a certain number of troops. They have to keep a garrison of a certain number of troops. And I never really play the Japanese, so I don't know what exactly that number is. If they do not, Stalin and his Soviets will invade or will become activated in the war. Now, they, of course, want this territory. It's right on their border. Um, and so if they feel that the Japanese are not paying any attention to that, they will activate and become part of the war. Of course, as a Japanese player, you would not want that. The Soviets have a lot of stuff. It's not necessarily the best quality stuff, but it's a lot of it. And if you don't have to fight, all of this, why would you? And so a Japanese player and the AI are going to keep enough of a garrison. I don't even know if it's called garrison. It's just enough troops up here to keep the Soviets from entering the war. Um, and so, looking through the map here, we really don't have a whole lot to think about down here. I mean, there's not going to be much action in Korea, etc. It's really all going to be here in the mainland. And then we have to make a decision about this area. And I am going to bring out the pencil again. We need to make a decision about this area right here. When Chao, Chusain, um, we need to make a decision. Now, usually, so what I was saying earlier, there's this friction, and I'm going to play a little bit differently this way, or this time. Usually, I take all of this out. It's very hard to defend it. These guys can get cut off if the Japanese come down here in force against a good Japanese player, human player. I think you almost have to bring all of this out unless you're just willing to hunker down here at Win Chao and, play Alamo. Um, Now, it's been brought to my attention that that's not how everybody looks at it. Some people think that you ought to try to keep Wen Chao and Shusen and hold them for as long as you can and have it kind of act as a speed bump. Now, one of those reasons would be that Wen Chao has manpower, it has resources, it has heavy industry, and it has a decent number of light industry, 80. None of those at this moment are damaged. They're all still good. And as we'll see later on the Chinese map, we do shut down repair on a lot of factories because they are damaged. They're already damaged, they're already put out of commission, and they're at risk from Japanese takeover. Win Chao, that is not the case. We have all of these fully functioning. Um, and so the other, decent sized town out here or base, Chusen, is it has resources. So okay, really Wen Chao is the jewel, and the Japanese will come after it fairly quickly. So the question becomes, what do we do right here? Do we kind of try to hold the line, you know, now, again, you run the risk of getting cut off from everything if you do that. If the Japanese come around here, you've got this whole pocket. Now, I think there are two thoughts about that. You have enough ground units and troops out here that even if the Japanese try to do that, first of all, it's a lot of ground to cover. But you could also potentially break that envelopment or encirclement because you just do have a lot of stuff. Now, you would have to get moving very fast before you run out of supply in that case. And I think the idea is maybe Wen Chao can keep you supplied fairly well. Again, it's a little riskier strategy, and I'm going to try it against the AI. It is a little more aggressive. So, I mean, we're not, you can see here, there's no movement, little divot here at Wen Chao. We're keeping everything here at Wen Chao that's at Wen Chao. So we've got the 100 Chinese, which is a 379 assault strength. Very nice squad. I mean, this is uh, it's a corps. It's 6,000 infantry troops and another 4,000 support troops. So these guys are going to move back. You can see the divot, that they're moving this way, they're moving this way, but they're only going about this far. And you can see here at Chusen, um, well, we don't even have any infantry here. We have a construction regiment. That's interesting. Um, so, these guys are going to come back here. We also have this group, the 32nd Group Army, that is going to stick around here at Pucheng. So, we've got a decent size force that's going to happen here. We have other guys that are dropping back. We have some that are dropping back this way, this way. Again, normally I would take all of these guys and either march them down this road to here or march them down these roads to here. It's a much better defensive situation, right? This is a huge bulge in the line. But as with all bulges, I just feel kind of funny saying that. As with all bulges, um, it can work one of two ways, right? If you're way bulged out here and the Japanese cut you off, that's not good. But if you're way bulged out here and you use that and start pressuring the Japanese at all of these places, you can work it to your advantage. We're not cut off at this point, and like I said, we've got, you know, one road, two roads, three roads that are still open. If this starts to close, we'll have to talk about it again. But that's what we're going to do down here. Now, further on up the map, um, let's talk about the really important spots here. Okay. This railway should be defended, in my opinion, and this railway at all costs as long and as hard as you can. All right. Now you may be saying, well, the Japanese have already pushed here. If you have followed Cole's spreadsheet, you will notice immediately we are on the attack. You may think that, hey, we're going to play all defense. Nope. We are immediately on the attack at Aicheng here. And the reason being is we would really like to push here and here. Now, the big cities you have to hold are all kind of on this railway. You have Luchao down here. Oh, sorry. Thought I still had this up. Oh, shoot. Give me one sec. Sorry. Sorry. We've got an art malfunction. Okay, there we go. You've got uh, Luchao here, right? Now Nanning, you could say, is kind of the start of that. It's on a major highway. Um, we're gonna leave this guy here, but the Japanese are gonna start pushing immediately. They're gonna drop back to Nanning first of all, and eventually probably to Luchao. So incredibly important here. It's the start of this railway. The main thing, you don't want the Japanese to be able to start just rolling people around on railways and or supplying their troops by the railways. So that's very important there. Down here, you could argue Wu Chao is, but you could run back to the railway, three different locations. We will try to hold Wu Chao. Um, Pakoi, not important really. A lot of times I will bring this guy immediately back here to Lu Chao. In this case, now maybe you noticed during the setup, we're actually bringing him over here, uh, but we'll get into that if we talk about this theater a little more in depth. That's not the most important thing to talk about here. Wu Chao is important. We'll try to hold it. If the Japanese get here, now all of a sudden they've kind of split us a little bit, right? So we'll try to hold that there. But Kukong, yep, whatever. Kukong is very important, obviously, because it is on this main railway that gets you a long way toward Changsha, and Changsha is probably tied for the most important Chinese location on the map. You should try to hold this to the death. Um, you know, of course, you have all of these bases here, but let's call all of this Changsha. Uh, it, this is super important. Um, just so I know. Yeah, it's Hengyang. Hengyang? Okay, Hengyang. Changsha, though, is the big crown jewel in this area. Um, down here, not as important. You can always run back to the rail line. I just look at that as my marker. How are we doing? Well, we haven't lost anything along the rail line here yet. You can always fall back to that, and I feel like as the Chinese player, you have not really lost much ground. You haven't lost anything that important. Um, of course, this is very important here, just because, so this is Kansan. Uh, it's very important just because it's kind of, the leading place that you would take here before you come trying to get Kukong. As we back up here, you'll notice the Yangtze River. So this is the Yangtze River system. Um, Obviously, a massive river system, one of the largest in the world. Uh, you're always, if you can, going to want to be behind this while you're being attacked. So just something to think about that, like we've got this guy is not in a base, but he's at where a major road, three different major roads all meet up, and he's behind the river. So this is a very good location. Same here, behind the river. The Japanese are going to have to cross that river, very difficult to do in this game, or at the very least, you really, really can accentuate their losses if you're behind a river like this. So, it's very defensible. Very defensible. Now it's unfortunate Changsha is actually not behind the river here because we would get that +4 urban bonus and then, also the disruption from the river, but you can't have everything you want, said Mick Jagger. Um, let's see. So we've kind of talked about this, Wen Chao and Chusain. We're going to try to hold those this time. All of these troops here, we're either going to try to position behind the river, or if they're here, we're going to put them in Changsha. As we move up here, so we're immediately attacking I Cheng. Let's talk about this. We have a lot of troops here. So this is the 26th Group Army. Oh, I think I should back up right now and talk about something really fast. So the way things are organized out here in China is you have what I would call regional commands, called these war areas. So this is the Ninth War Area. It's an army headquarters, so it's the Ninth Army if you want to look at it that way. But in China they call them the war areas. So the Ninth War Area, and I think you have, gosh, I don't even know how many of these. I guess we could go look if I really wanted to, but I don't know. What is it? 20 war areas? Maybe a couple more, a couple less. You have a lot of these regional commands. So how does this structure work? Well, you have the war area on top, right? Then you have cores, okay? And here we go. Well, is that the best way to describe it? Let's think about this for a second. No. Okay, let's think of it this way. You have the Ninth War Area, which is an Army headquarters. So this works just like the other Allied troops. Army headquarters on top. Then you have a Corps headquarters, and they're called, the 19th Group Army. So this is the Ninth War Area, 19th Group Army. The direct commander for that, or the direct command unit for that, is the Ninth War Area. So this would be no different if you have the U.S. You know Second Army, and then they have the 30th Corps, and then they have divisions underneath it. The way this is organized is war area, corps headquarters, which is called a group army, and then we have another one, and we have another one. Now, you're always going to want to keep these very close to their war area. right? So it's 4 stars, 3 stars, 3 stars, 3 stars, if it helps you kind of put that in your, in your mind. So as part of this war area, we have 3 core headquarters, okay? And then these core headquarters are the ones that are commanding these units. So you'll see here, we have the 10th Chinese Corps. All right. That 10th Chinese Corps is part of the 29th Group Army. There's the 29th Group Army. They only have a command radius of 1. So this really needs to be stacked with it or right next to it, in a hex right next to it. As these core headquarters out in China only have a command radius of 1. The war areas have a command radius of 5. So, a setup for this would be just, making something up is you have, your war area, and then 5 hexes out, you have a core headquarter, and then 5, you have a core headquarter, and then 5 again, a core headquarter, and then their smaller cores need to be within one of them or stacked with them, right? And so that's just kind of how the command structure works out in China. And again, you're going to want that command bonus anytime you can get it. The Chinese are not outmanned, but they are out equipmented, they're outgunned, they have very little air force. The Japanese will have air superiority at pretty much all times. A good, Japanese player can do whatever it wants in the air against the Chinese, what limited air resources they have. So you basically have a wave of men as the Chinese player. You have a lot of units, and you're going to get more. Now, you know, how were those men used in World War II? Well, let's put it this way. They were used as waves of men. There were very, very high casualty rates because really the Chinese had no other choice against the Japanese. The Japanese just had superior training, superior equipment, superior everything else. So I guess the point being is you're going to be getting a lot of men, but you need to use every advantage that you have. And one of those is buffing up your men by keeping them close to their commanders and getting any buff and bonus that you can get. Now, generally, that's about 10%, I think, if you're with your direct superior. Now, that can bonus off of itself if you're also in the area of the north, in this case, the Ninth War area. That bonus is added to your commander's bonus, is added to your unit. So the closer you can keep them to their command structure, the better, because you need all the help you can get, quite frankly. Now, so we were talking about I Cheng. One of the interesting things we're going to do in this turn, and I did follow Cole, his advice here, is we have these level bombers at Changsha, and so we're going to go bomb. This is the second place on the map we've seen this. Now, for the most part, we're thinking defense here at the start, but in a few select locations, and I'm actually going to flip over to Burma after we talk about this really fast. I'm going to flip over to Burma because we're going to be doing that over there as well. But we're going to take each of these level bomber squadrons. So it looks like there's 4, 4, 4, 3, and 3. We've got them all selected to ground attack, and they're targeting I Chang. So that's fun. We're going to be running about, 10 to 15, almost 15 bombers, medium level bombers, at this Japanese ground force at I Chang. We're going to bomb them, and then we have people coming from everywhere. Almost all of these units anyway, up here are going to be backing up into I Chang and try to take this base back over. This is the furthest extent to which the Japanese have pushed, at least into the heartland here of China, and we could maybe get around them here a little bit, push them here, push them here. We could potentially surround them a little bit and maybe pick off some Japanese forces. Now, it's not often that we're on the offense here early in the game, but this is one of those cases. And as you can see, Changsha is like the main kind of airfield down here. We've got, what is it? 32 aircraft here total, and half of them are already in for maintenance. So, we've got 32 aircraft. This is kind of our Air Force in central China, as sad as that may sound. But we're going to do something offensive with them, so that's fun. That reminds me, we are going to be bombing down here in Burma, and I don't think we talked about this. So we're going to be bringing this force down here to Chiang Mai. Uh, Part of this goes to something we're going to talk about here. We are bringing forces here and here in kind of an offensive nature. That is not just being offensive, uh, both literally and figuratively. That is to activate what's called the Indochina Militia. The AI for the Japanese needs this little buff. These things should be activated, and the way to do that is to threaten Indochina. And this will make some units sprout up for the Japanese. It's just essentially you're doing the AI a favor because you want a good game. Okay, so we're going to be bringing some things here into, or close to Indochina to activate the militia here in Indochina. What used to be, or what used to be Indochina is, it's now Vietnam. We know it better as Vietnam today. But anyway, the point being is we're going to be activating their militia for them. That's just to help the AI a little bit. So I did think it was appropriate to point that out because some of you may have been asking, why are we making this kind of random move into Indochina? Are we going on the offense? Not really, not really. We're doing that for a game purpose. It's not a real objective or strategy. So back to our strategy though. Now, as you'll see, we have forces all kind of scattered out in here, right? The Japanese stormed into China. They took some areas. Now, this has been going on for, as I said, like since July of 37. So you're talking 4.5 years this war has been going on. But, and therefore the line has gotten a bit ragged. Now, some of these guys we're going to pull kind of back a little bit. Others of them we're going to try to, push here and there where we can. But the important thing are these bases and this rail line. As I was saying, this rail line. So we talked about this rail line down here. I look at this one the same way. This major rail line that runs up here. To me, this is it. This is the goal line, right? We're going to get in the goal line defense and do everything we can to, push back the Japanese here where they've already gone beyond it and, try to hold this line because you don't want the Japanese just running supplies and troops up and down this major railway. Now, as part of that, so, we talked about Aichang. Up here, you have other important cities. You have Nanyang, and we'll talk about Nanyang a little bit. But here are the two major ones, Chengchao and Luoyang. Chengchao and Luoyang are behind a river. They're major bases. You can build up their fortifications. You've got a ton of troops here. I look at these as kind of hold at all costs if I can places. Of course, if you get knocked back here and have to go to Nanyang, it's not the end of the world. Heck, if you get knocked back behind this river, it's not the end of the world. That being said, we're going to do everything we can to try to hold on to these major places here on, you know, kind of one of the northern nodes of this railroad here at Chengchao, and then Loyang is kind of its sister city. You'll see here we've got, the First War area. We have two group armies. We have some infantry. We're bringing more. And again, you should look around at these units. I'm not going to go through every one of them here, but you should look around at these units and try to get, you know, let's look at one. 31st Group Army. Where is the 31st Group Army? Now I know that we're taking this and moving it back here because I'm looking at that little divot, and I bet you that's the 31st Group Army, Corps Headquarters. Indeed it is. Now the reason we're moving him down here and not up here to what I just said was super important is this is very important as well. We don't want the Japanese to just, bust over here and essentially be in our rear in this important base. So we're bringing some troops down here to try to hold on to this over river passage. We're up into this is the Yellow River system up in here. Um, so yeah, we're going to bring troops down here, but you see that I knew that the 31st must be here because we're moving this guy down here to be with them. Now within one, he's still getting the command radius, but there's no reason to have him out here all by himself. You've got some troops moving back, moving, here, there. I think we're moving this one actually to the right to jump on here. We're gonna, we're here at a potential base. So that's interesting. Um, so as we get up here, again, Chengqiao, Luoyang, these are super important in my mind anyway. We're moving a lot of these troops around. Now let's talk about Yan'an and Sian. Very interesting dynamic up here. This is part of the reason I love this game and the scope of this game is, we've got all of these things going on down in the Pacific, but think about this dynamic up here. You've got, a lot of troops at Yan'an, uh, but many of them are Red Chinese divisions. And you're like, what's going on? Well, of course, as became very apparent after the war, the Chinese, the Red Chinese, so the communist Chinese, were very strong up here in the northern part of China. When the Japanese invaded, um, essentially, Chiang Kai-shek, who was the leader of the nationalistic Chinese, which are the vast majority of the Chinese on the map here, Chiang Kai-shek sat down, well, I don't know if they actually did this face to face, but their emissaries, whatever, with Mao Zedong and said, look, we can fight out our problems after the war, but let's hold off the Japanese. Let's beat back the Japanese because they're foreign invaders, and then we'll deal with our own internal civil war later. So if we go here to Sian, you will see a command unit, Army headquarters, for the Red Chinese Army. It is commanded by General Mao Zedong. So Mao Zedong, we are actually going to move up here to Yan'an, where I think every single Red Chinese division, here's another one, is located. Okay, so the nationalistic guys, like the Second War area, which is a nationalistic army headquarters, we're going to move back to Sian and we'll make this a nationalistic. We're going to move the Red Chinese Army and basically have the Red Chinese Army control Yan'an. You can read a lot about that. It's really fascinating how that all played out, right? You've got a kind of a civil war, at least a cultural civil war going on within a country, and they get invaded by a foreign invader. They decide to set aside their differences somewhat. Now, no one is going to claim that there wasn't fighting between nationalistic and Chinese uh, communists during World War II. I mean, look, they were shooting at each other too. But in the big scope, if coming together isn't the right term, they at least didn't fall apart. How about that? They decided to beat the Japanese first, and then, of course, in 1949, Mao Zedong and the Chinese Communists um, took control of China 4 years after the war. It's amazing how much World War II really shaped the globe. Of course, in 1949 is also the year that Gandhi and the Indians, if you call them Indians, uh, got their independence from the British Empire. That is the year that the Chinese communists took over China. Anyway, that's the interplay for our game purposes here without going down a whole history rabbit hole. That's what's happening here at Yan'an and Sian. We'll bring nationalistic forces back to Sian. We'll take the Red Chinese, put them up here at Yan'an, and say, hey, you guys kind of run this little part of the war. Um, and we won't have our troops shooting at your troops and vice versa. Not that that would happen in this game, but just looking at it historically. So we have some other guys moving along. We have these minor railways coming out here. Again, this major railway goes all the way up here. We are going to try to take this little area of Patao and take this back from the Japanese. Um, I always like to try to get this node right here so that we've got the northern part of this railroad and then eventually try to come down here. We'll see if we can pull that off. I mean, obviously, the Japanese have a lot of strong army units here. You see the red. Now, one thing I did want to talk about in this episode that maybe we didn't cover in the ground units is about the ground units themselves. Um, a lot of times we are in this episode, or I say in this setup, or I say in this episode, it's really in this setup when you go through the Cole spreadsheet. We are breaking down units. So we're taking um, a bigger unit. We're hitting split unit. Now this one says rebuild. We could go find one that we split, but I'm not going to do that right now. You get the idea if you set these up. If you're just watching this and you haven't set it up yet, essentially this button, if the unit is all together, will say split unit. And if you hit it, it will go into an A part, a B part, and a C part. And usually while you're doing that is you have like two or three different things that need to be done. So maybe the C unit is a garrison here, the A unit stays where it is and is a garrison, and the B unit goes and guards, let's say, a river crossing or something. Now you'll see here it'll say rebuild unit. That's the red Chinese. I just rebuilt that. I just clicked on it and rebuilt them. It just puts them all together. So we had those uh, three red divisions. They're now the 8th Route Army. Okay. Next turn, I'll split them back apart. Don't let me forget to do that. See, here you have one. 42nd Chinese Corps. Now we've got them all going to Cyan. We could divide them. Now they're all divided into an A core. If we go here, A core, B core, and C core, and you can rebuild them again and put them back into the 42nd Chinese. So I think we did cover that slightly in the tutorial. I just wanted to point that out because we do that several times in this setup. We move them around. Another thing I wanted to talk about is the toe, as we call it. Um, this is what the unit is comprised of, right? It's the table of elements. So these are all elements, right? And it'll tell you how many you have, how many are damaged at this point. Those will be in these brackets. I wanted to show you this. So show unit toe or table of elements. And it's going to show you the Chinese normal infantry. If we click on this, this shows you what the ideal setup would be for a Chinese core infantry unit. Okay, it would be 729 rifle squads. Now, usually a squad could be anywhere from 6 to 10 men. Uh, MMG section, which is, I believe, mobile machine gun. That's what I believe it to be. It's a machine gun of some sort. I just can't remember if that means mobile. I'm sorry. Somebody can let me know in the comments. I guess in some respects it's not that important. 54 of these. Uh, Anti-tank guns, 37 millimeter, 81 millimeter. You get the idea. This is the ideal setup. So when you hit that button down here, that's always going to show you what the ideal setup is and what the base element for that ideal setup is. What does this plus mean? Okay, what this plus means is that we are not at the ideal amount here, and there are these available in the pool. Okay, you're like, interesting. So let's remember this. It's a Chinese MMG section. All right. Now we're going to go up here to info, and we're going to look at troop resource pool. I believe that's where it is. And we'll turn off all nationalities, and we'll just turn on the Chinese. Okay. So these are all the things you have available in your pool, how quickly the build rate is, availability, whether you're stockpiling them. We'll talk about stockpiling because that's also part of Cole's spreadsheet, like a different section of that. We'll talk about stockpiling before this whole setup is over, but it's a little bit beyond where we are now. But let's look down. So you see 81 millimeter mortars. We saw those before. Let's look MMG section. Okay, so this is Chinese, the Chinese MMG section. That's what we're looking for. And now you see we have 5 of these in the pool, in our pool. We don't have a lot in the pool. We have this 80 millimeter anti-aircraft gun. Um, we've got 4 of those. We've got some Vickers here, okay. And we've got 5 of these MMG sections. Do have a build rate of 8, so we, potentially will be getting more of those. But when we're thinking about replacements and reinforcements, so let's go back to this unit. We have no replacements on. We also have no upgrade on, and you will know that there are upgrades because there will be another marking next to these when you upgrade or could upgrade. But this plus essentially means, hey, if we turn on replacements, we could, if this is the only unit where we turn those on, we would get those 5 MMG sections to this unit. That's what that plus means. So if you see that plus, it's telling you, hey, maybe go look at the pool. Maybe we have a lot of those and we can build this unit up more. Now, we're not going to do that. This isn't, the most important unit by any stretch of the imagination in the game. And so, that plus will be there. If we start building out more 81 millimeter mortars, um, we may get a plus here that says, hey, we've got more of these in the pool. If you turn on replacements, the game will start trying to stock you up here. And so this is very important. You can always look at what's the ideal setup. Now, of course, the Chinese have nothing in the pool and they don't have a whole lot on the way. And so, 729 rifle squads would be the normal setup. We click here again. We've got 161 that are actually active and not damaged. 40 damage, 161 that are active. We are way under strength. Um, as the game moves on, though, as the Chinese, you do have a lot of men. So you always kind of want to be checking that resource pool for especially things like rifle squads. You can start taking some of your important units and turning replacements on and, getting replacement rifle squads, for instance, because the one thing you do have is men. So just something to think about. I wanted to point that out. Now, to wrap up this episode, I just wanted to talk about a couple of interesting places. Now, there was not much, if any, task force set up here, this whole Chinese area, except for down here at Hong Kong. And I just wanted to talk a minute about what we're doing here. Um, you have these motorboats here. These we're getting the heck out. But what I really want to talk about is these 3 destroyers. We're taking these destroyers down to Tarragon, and every one of these destroyers has, a 2 anti-sub. They're not the best ships in the world. They're worth 5 points. Not a big deal. Um, but we are getting them down to Tarragon here, and we are going to run some anti-sub with them. I'll probably, since they're only 5 points and they're only a 2, I may put them up in here and just try to catch a sub with those guys. They're not, they're not great ships. That being said, they could be helpful. Now, what I did want to point out is we are splitting a lot of these cargo ships out into one ship task forces, and we are running them at different speeds. Okay, and this is a rather ingenious way, again, hat tip to Cole as always, uh, ingenious way of kind of spreading these guys out as much as you can, making them tougher targets, tougher to spot for the Japanese. They'll be moving at different speeds. So here you'll see the Yatching is going at full speed. You've got the Suchao going at cruise speed. You've got another cruise speed. You've got a mission speed here with the Joan Moeller. Um, the Halidor is also going at mission speed. So as you can see, he's varied the speeds quite a bit to try to get these guys spread out a little bit, not make them this just one big floating moving target. And what are our orders? They're to come down here. So this just goes to show you how flexible this system is as far as orders go, is look at all the different orders essentially that we've given this Joan Muller. Okay, it's going at mission speed. We've changed that, right? It's not going to unload when it gets to Tawi Tawi. We've set the home port at Tawi Tawi. It's not going to refuel, and we've named it Cargo Cebu. Okay, you're like, what in the world? So all of those orders, what do they mean? It means this thing's coming out of here at mission speed. It's following, it's got some compatriots that are out here at full speed. It's coming out at mission speed, which means it'll go green. What is that? 3.5, 1, 2, 2.5. Another 2.5. It'll be out here after one turn, and then so on and so forth. It's coming down here. It will be out of fuel. No, it will not. I'm sorry. The full speed ones will be out of fuel with 4 hexes to go. They only have enough fuel to go full speed, I believe, for 25 hexes. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, it's a 29 hex journey. They can only go full speed for 25. Now, what happens? And this is why I wanted to talk about it is one, two, or 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 hexes out, this thing is going to quote unquote run out of gas. But nothing in this game truly runs out of gas. What will happen is it will move 1 hex per turn until it gets here. Okay? So it, you know, when you set that up, you may have said, well, this is red. How does that work? What is it just going to sink into the ocean here? No, it will continue on to where it's going, just at the slowest possible pace. Now, we've got it coming here. They are not unloading. They are then going to, the ones at full speed will refuel. They'll have to. Um, a little bit. And then we're going to bring them over here into Cebu to build up some supplies here, because what eventually happens to the Americans down here is they kind of just run out of supply. The Japanese come in here and these fighting forces are not in good condition. Um, so anyway, I just wanted to point that out. I thought it was pretty interesting. We're also running a little bit of an offensive mission with these torpedo bombers. Um, and these torpedo bombers will be using bombs. We're going to do naval attack. Now, that's not something we've done before. When we do naval attack, it will be out. What's their normal range here? I think we've got them. Well, let's just look. Do we have them flying? No, we've got them at their maximum range. Okay. And I guess I could have known that because it's blue right there. They'll be flying out, you know, here. And we've got naval attack on. When you have naval attack on, you cannot pick your target. The target is picked by your commander. The AI picks it essentially. But we're going to be running an offensive, maneuver out here. These guys are going to be looking for Japanese ships to bomb. Now, they do not have torpedoes. That's why we're using bombs. Again, you could leave it on here because if they don't have torpedoes, they'll just switch to bombs. But let's go ahead and put that on bombs. There are only three of them, but this is kind of fun. Hopefully they'll run into something. But I did want to just show you for the first time we're doing naval attack. Naval attack, you do not control the target. Also with naval attack, you set a secondary mission. What does that mean? That means if the AI does not find anything it likes as far as a naval attack goes, it has this secondary mission it will go to, and it will do this instead. It's the only one of these that really works this way. I mean, when you pick training, of course, you get this menu up to pick what kind of training. But naval attack is the only one where you say, okay, you go out there and pick a good task force to hit. But if you don't find one, here's your secondary command. Now, the secondary command we have here is rest. Okay. But hopefully they'll find something out here that'd be cool. The last thing I wanted to point out that's just kind of, an oddity or interesting about China is there is a group of fighters up here, if I can find them. Oh, they're at Hami. There are a lot of aircraft up here at Hami. Why that is, I've never looked into it historically. I don't know why that is. Maybe this was a major Air Force base to protect against potential Soviet aggression. I just don't know. We could sit here and guess all day. But the point being is you have all of these planes out here at Hami. They have very short maximum ranges, and so you've got to very slowly hop them down here. We've already transferred some out. I can't remember. I think maybe they're at Lanchow, the ones that have a little bit better. Yeah, these guys, we brought them out. They have a maximum range of 10, these I-15s. But what we have up here at Hami are I-16s, I believe. Yeah, I-16s. They only have a maximum of 6. So we are going to bring them south. But because of that, you may have noticed we're moving some aviation support up, into these bases because we're going to have to hop these guys down all the way to get them down here. Uh, I said the final thing. Actually, the final thing I really wanted to talk about was Chongqing. Chongqing is kind of almost acts like your major staging base in China during this conflict. It's up here, it's up in the hills, it's up in the mountains, um, and you just get a lot of things up here. You have, uh, you know, what would we call them? Reinforcements. You have new units, et cetera, et cetera. They're all connected to the Central Reserve. So this is your Central Reserve, really. Always kind of look up here, see what you've got. You probably noticed this time if you did set up, we are running a ton of stuff out of here. You always kind of want to send it down this highway so it moves fast. Down here to Yun. Yun is important. It's the end of this railway line, but this is one way to get your reinforcements out is roll them down here to Tayun, then you can rail them, all over. But that's kind of how we bring our reinforcements, our spawned units, our new stuff out. Oh, and there's always one more thing, right? Don't forget, this is the Burma Road. It's critically important because our big problem is supply. All of these guys, at one point or another, it seems, get undersupplied. And remember where to look for that. Let's just pull up, sorry, let's pull up this group here. They require 733 supplies per turn. Right now they have 1,000. We'll see if that lasts, especially if the Japanese start bearing down on them, they get attacked, maybe the Japanese get, here on this railway or, God forbid, get up on this highway, they wouldn't be really getting any supplies. You have got to keep this open. And then, once it gets down here to this major highway, so here's your Burma Road. Once it gets here, as long as you control this and down to Rangoon this way, you're fine. then it gets dispersed out in the country from this railway. But everything's going to be about supply. That reminds me of this transport, where eventually this transport, I say this one like it's only one plane, it's actually 21 planes. We're going to get those over to India. They have a big maximum range. Their extended radius is 12. We are going to be picking up supply with those and running shuttles back and forth to China just to try to get every little bit of supply into China that we can. And with that, I think I'm going to call this episode to a close. Very interesting topic, and gosh, this is a fascinating area of the war. Lots of good reading if you wanted to read about this whole, Chinese nationalistic Chinese, or I should say, red Chinese nationalistic Chinese conflict that they kind of put aside. It's very, very fascinating history. We're definitely on the back foot in China, but as you saw from this setup this time, there are things we can do. We're going to attack, I Cheng. We're going to do some ground bombing there. So you just kind of got to pick your spots. We're also going to be a little more aggressive down here by Wen Chao than I usually am. So anyway, as always, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this and you haven't yet, please subscribe down below. I would appreciate it. And until next time, this is Strategy Gaming Dojo. I'll talk to you.